there is no one cause of inflation. At the best of times, it involves a multitude of factors, and the situation that we're in right now has been an unprecedented perfect storm. And to understand that storm, it might actually help to pause for a moment to talk about the mechanics of inflation. Very basically, it happens whenever there is too much demand for too little supply. If people have lots of money to spend, they usually want to buy more stuff. But if there is not enough stuff to go around, then the price of that stuff goes up. Blaming Biden's stimulus package has become a common refrain on the right when discussing inflation. And the reality is, there is a kernel of truth to it. Thanks to the pandemic-era stimulus bills, people did have more cash on hand. But that is not the only reason. As strange as it sounds, many people saved money during the early days of the pandemic simply because we were all stuck at home. Two things are likely true here. The government stimulus did contribute to inflation, but it was also a necessary intervention. And the much bigger point is, inflation clearly isn't just about the stimulus at all. After all, it's not just a problem here in the US. Britain and Germany have seen inflation rates hit 4-decade highs, and in 7 Eastern European nations, it's now expected to surge past double digits. Inflation truly was a perfect storm going into the year, and it seems like everything that's happened since then has only made it worse. When Biden said inflation is largely the fault of Putin, that is clearly not true. Putin invading Ukraine didn't start this inflationary cycle, but it is making it worse. And the same can be said of corporate greed. It is absolutely true that some companies are taking advantage of this environment to drive up prices, and they're getting record profits in return, and that is infuriating. But most economists will tell you that's not what caused inflation in the first place. After all, it's not like corporations only just got greedy in the last 2 years. As the cost of living rises, workers might demand higher wages to cover that, which in turn raises the cost of labour, leading businesses to charge higher prices, leading to still more inflation. It's basically a vicious cycle. That is why the worse our inflation expectations are, the worse it can get. So, to recap, rising prices are due to a ton of factors: a pandemic, a stimulus, changed spending patterns, supply chain issues, the war in Ukraine, to name just a few. And anyone loudly saying that one thing is the cause of inflation is either lying or has absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And the fact is, whichever combination of things got us into this mess, the entity that many are looking to get us out of it is the Federal Reserve. The Fed can indirectly influence how much people are spending. So when it comes to the demand side of the economy, they have some real power here. One thing that would really help is if we knew the extent to which this is a supply or a demand problem, if it's more about too much money or not enough stuff. Because if it is too much money, the Fed can impact that pretty easily. What they'd want to do is raise interest rates significantly enough to curb spending and slow growth, but not so aggressively that it would then trigger a painful recession. The question of whether inflation is caused more by supply or demand basically determines how much influence the Fed has to improve things. Unfortunately, even economists don't really agree on which is the bigger driver here. Meaning the truth is, inflation may not be fully within our control right now. One, it's going to take a difficult combination of monetary policy, supply chain recovery, and time to bring supply and demand back into alignment. And two, I am the Warren Buffett of frogs.